Hello, and welcome to New York Festival's leadership panel, Carving Stairs into Stone. I'm Chantelle Brinkley, Managing Director at Zerotrillion. We are here today to talk about leadership. Leadership in that time in our lives where we begin to lead organizations as well as those who are coming up the ranks after that. At that point, leaders have a choice. They can choose to look down at the next generation, thinking things like, well, I face so many difficulties, they should too. Or we can choose to carve stairs into stone, to forge a new path that removes unnecessary barriers and creates a new space that wasn't available to us. I'm so thrilled to dig into this discussion and to introduce our guests. So first, without further ado, we have Tennille Kopiaz. Thank you so much for joining. Tennille is the Global Chief Marketing Officer at Fresh LVMH. She has worked at pretty much every beauty brand you could possibly imagine. Her career is incredibly illustrious, and we are so thankful to have you here today.
Thank you.
We also have Ashley Stalling, and Ashley is the Chief Customer Officer at Salsify, a global e-commerce and digital shelf platform. Welcome.
Thank you
for being here. And Marina Sakova. Marina is an expert at all things digital. She runs digital for L'Oreal Luxe brands.
Welcome. Thank you.
And Angelique Belmer-Krems. Angelique is a 21-year veteran of PepsiCo. She was also the global head of brand at BlackRock. And in her latest venture, she has co-authored a book called You Should Smile More, which focuses on gender bias in the workplace.
Great to be here.
Welcome. Looking back on your careers, there's probably many things that you've had to deal with that at the time you thought were just run-of-the-mill, everyday things that everyone has to deal with. But maybe now looking back, you think, that probably wasn't really the right way or the right thing to have that experience. What is something that you look back on and feel like should be changed moving forward? Angelique?
I think about probably some of the more senior years of my career, because when I was more junior, I don't think there were any big things that I was like, wishing that had gone differently. But when I became a more senior leader, I remember getting feedback that I needed to be seen breaking glass. That's what they told me. They said, you need to be seen breaking glass. And looking back on that moment right now, I don't think I had the understanding or the language to push back on that and say, why is that important? What is the impact of that? And I now know that it was more that all the leaders around me looked a certain way and fit a certain style, and people expected leaders to be breaking glass, pounding the table, and that's not my style. And I think I can have a lot of impact without that, but I didn't have the language or the perspective, I think, to challenge that, and I would probably do that now.
And what advice would you give someone now who is maybe being told that or being pushed in that direction of how to deal with it?
Well, I think there's a lot of comments that come up in reviews that you could put in the category of lazy language, like she's not a good fit, or you're too emotional, or you should smile more, or anything like that. And the easy place to start, I think, is to say, can we talk about the impact of that? Like, as we always bring it to how does that impact my work or my effectiveness, that's the place to start. That's what I would.
Is there a different way forward?
Is it a difference that makes a difference?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. There are different ways to achieve the same outcome.
Right. And then hopefully through that dialogue, make way for more styles to show up in leadership, right? There isn't just one model, and there should be room for all different types. And that's how you get diversity of thought, rising up in the ranks.
Absolutely. I love that. Marina, what about you? What's something that at the time you thought was kind of just part of the job, but looking back should definitely change?
That's a good question. I was reflecting a lot about that. I think that the biggest switch, and something that I would never do now, it's being accommodating as a manager, and being accommodating as someone who has a direct manager who is asking to do a lot of things, and then you can't push back because you're trying to do your job. So now what I would do differently, always protecting my time, my boundaries, and keep myself on this mental balance where I have work, but apart from work, I also have life. Because in the end, if you don't think about your life, and when you are 99% at your office and your thoughts all about work, one day you will burn out, and it will never help you to achieve this spike in your career where you want to go. So my recommendation is always to keep this balance in everything that you're doing, and protect your boundaries, and try to achieve everything, but with a slower pace, and with love and trust in yourself.
Well, it's sort of like being really thoughtful and intentional about how you use your time. We're all pulled in many directions, but as much as there's the business focus of, I think, each of our jobs, there's also a requirement of a ton of creativity. And if you're only spending 100 hours working, there's no room to be inspired, to go on a walk and solve a problem that you've been working on for weeks. So I love that. Ashley?
Yeah, so I've been reflecting a lot about a common topic right now. So the compensation and title equity. And I think a lot of times it inadvertently creeps into organizations. And I was thinking about, as I was coming up through my organization and as I started to take on more leadership positions, there was a moment when, we were growing fast and hiring people from the outside. And I looked around and I said, there's people that actually have a lot less responsibility than I do, with higher titles than I do. And I was made aware that they also, in some cases, made more money than I did. So I had to have that hard and scary conversation where I said, hey, this doesn't feel right. And it was fixed very quickly. And I don't believe it was done on purpose. But, I reflect upon, had I not said anything, would that have been fixed? And so what I try to do with my team now is really consciously review that on a consistent basis as we hire more people onto the team. And, we had a situation probably 3 or 4 months ago where we promoted 2 individual contributors into manager roles. And the male said, hey, can I actually get a little bit more compensation? And we reviewed it and we said, yeah, that feels fair. And, we were about to move on, and I said, hold on, if the female did not ask for that, and I said, if she did, would we give it to her? And we said, yes, of course we would. So we, we made that right. But I think you have to be very, very conscious of those decisions and look out for them, because we're all moving so fast, and it's hard to kind of see that unless you're thinking about it.
That's so important, because everyone needs an advocate. I think there's so many people who talk about, and Angelique, I know you talk about this in your book, but they talk about mentorship. You need to find a mentor, someone you can talk to about the trials and tribulations that you're going through, but you more importantly need a sponsor. You need someone who is looking out for you in your career, who's setting up those opportunities for you to really make those stretch goals, to fight for your salary if you know something is going up. So I think that's just so incredibly important, and incredible that you're doing that at the organizational level.
Yeah, and I try to tell all the people I speak to now that are growing up throughout their careers, you have to remember that you're also your best advocate. So you have to ask for the things that you want. You don't get the things that you deserve always. You get the things that you ask for.
And do you do coaching along those lines of when you're looking at those that are reporting into you in your team structures?
Yeah, we do. We do a lot of internal coaching and management, but as I bring new managers on that don't have management experience, we also usually get them outside coaching so that they have somebody that they can talk to that's not within the organization, that's, the conversation's not going to creep back to the day-to-day things that you just need to get done.
Right. Gives them a little bit of confidence to kind of show up as they are and work on that. That's great.
For me, jumping on what you were saying, I think there's a lot of conversation, especially for women, about getting a mentor. And mentors are great, but there's something different in finding an advocate. An advocate is someone that you've worked really hard for, you proved yourself for, and when going gets tough, they're gonna fight for you and take you to the next level. And so while I think mentors are great, advocates are what you need. And that's what's going to take you to the next level. So who is that woman that's going to be behind you, fight for you when the going gets tough, And so those are really important for young people to establish in their career.
I agree.
I agree wholeheartedly. And it's great if it can be a woman, but I think it can also be a man.
Sure.
A man. I have had incredible advocates who have been male bosses who have really just worked with me closely. But yes, I mean, if it's just a mentor relationship, it kind of stops at advice. But those advocates are those who are really going to give you that leg up and give you the confidence to continue to build your skill set and to give you new opportunities to elevate your career.
You know, the research actually says that women tend to be over-mentored and under-sponsored because of the dynamic of they're seeking out mentors who are other women, and sponsors have to have organizational power. And just the way the numbers are at the executive levels, often you need to get more men involved to advocate and sponsor women. So that's one of the challenges.
And in your research, are there any tips and tricks for those who might be looking for advocates or sponsors, and what's the right way to go about it? Because it can be daunting.
Yes, it definitely can. And I'm sure these women also have experience in successfully navigating that. So knowing that it starts from power, it's understanding the power structures of your organization and paying attention to who is advocating for people, and people are moving up because they're associated with certain people. And thinking outside of the box, because it isn't always your direct line, executive. It could be someone in a associate function, and looking for those opportunities, because you can't go and ask someone, will you be my sponsor? Like, you have to prove yourself, as you said, you have to. So you're looking for those opportunities where you've had a chance to show something successful, that person has taken a notice of you, follow up and say, hey, I saw that you noticed my work. I'd love to tell you more about it, or get more thoughts from you, and look for those opportunities.
Tina, what are your thoughts?
So for me, throughout my career, I've seen it all. From slamming doors to disrespecting to really not being the manager or leader I would ever want to be. So it sounds really simple, but just treating others the way you want to be treated is the basic fundamental of my leadership style. And ultimately, if you treat others the way you want to be treated, people are going to treat you that way in response. And ultimately, you're going to get the most from people. If you have the bar high for yourself, others are going to follow. And let's face it, we all have a lot going on in our personal lives. We all have a lot going on in life in general. You're at work more than you are with your family, your friends, and no one wants to be put down. So I think at the end of the day, it's a really basic, simple, fundamental thing. It's just treat others with respect the way you want to be treated. And it's amazing how the team will follow along with you. And I always say there's no I in team. At the end of the day, what you can accomplish with an entire collective is way greater with the sum of its parts.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and it's just that very basic idea of bringing you're human, and coming to an office, and everyone, no matter who you are, has things. They might, something might have not gone so great in the morning, and you show up and no one wants to be disrespected, and that just makes you feel so much worse. And then it might take a couple days for you to come out of that. Whereas if you show up to an environment and everyone is positive and uplifting, and yes, mistakes happen and things do not always go as planned, but if you can keep that human element, I've experienced the same thing where people just will rally. And yes, maybe something didn't go wrong. Maybe there's a huge problem. But if you're coming to a workspace and you feel energized and just excited to be there and be around it, then I completely agree that team will rally behind you and probably deliver something better than you could have imagined.
And I think you can say, is the glass half empty or half full? It's the same glass. It's just, how do you look at it?
And what are those opportunities? Things happen, and how do you, it's about how you react and how you kind of rise above it. What do you think leaders have in terms of a responsibility for mentoring, sponsoring, advocating for those who are coming up the ranks behind you?
I'll start with, I think it's changed over time. Like, I think there was a generation of women that were the onlys in the room and the firsts in the room, and it was a different track to get there. And I think they had to take a different path, and it wasn't one that they were like, oh, come follow me. It was like, I got here, and now, like, I think women are more looking at like, how can I make more room for others? I've felt a change in energy of the responsibility that people feel to make room for others. Maybe that's a personality difference, like that is just from my experience, but I feel like there's more interest now in paying it forward and paying attention to like your legacy, like your coaching tree, if you will, like who are all the players who work for you that go on to great things. I feel that that's a really great measure of success when you can look at the people who have gone on to other things after being on your team. So it's a way of measuring success. And I'm not sure if it's a responsibility as much as just good leadership behavior, that can be measured.
Yeah, that idea of legacy and leaving that kind of tree with tons of branches and all of those that you impact, because I think that can impact the world.
I also feel that the more senior you get, you can always launch a new product, have a new campaign, drive a business. But at the end of the day, watching people succeed gives you a lot of personal fulfillment.
Yes.
So you get to the point where it's not about you, it's about the others around you. And watching them grow, watching them be elevated, it gives you a whole nother level of personal satisfaction. And once you understand that, it becomes this whole flywheel that doesn't stop. And so, that would be my dream, is that ultimately you continue that flywheel to pass it on. So you treat others that way, and then they will for the next generation. I think the previous generations were different. They had to hide their personal life, anything that they had going on. It was a very male-dominated world. It's okay now to bring yourself to work. It was not that way a mere even 5 years ago.
Yes.
Well, and just jumping on the difference between focusing on the product launches and the campaigns and all that stuff, which I think as a more experienced leader, you realize that it's really about the people. Your job as a leader is about creating the conditions for great business results, great creative results, and that's focused on the people. And I think that that's sometimes a light bulb that goes off when you realize that you have to switch your focus.
I've been chatting to a lot of different leaders, and they've said something very similar, that early on in their careers, when they started to reach success and become managers, it was much more ego-driven, if you will, in a sense of, I've achieved this. It's all about me and this level that I've risen, and I've really proven myself, and I want to feel great about myself. But then there is that light bulb moment of, okay, but I do still want to continue to achieve, but also leading in service of others. And if you do lead in service of others, you can probably achieve much greater things than when you're so focused on just your own journey and rising the ranks.
Yeah, I agree. Being a leader, it's to remove your ego, because it usually prevents you to succeed as being a leader. And the difference between being a leader and being a manager, leader usually has followers, and to get these followers and to build this dynamic with your team, you need to build trust, you need to be able to help, you need to support them, and it's always about them, not about you. And that's the difference of the dynamic that was 30 years ago versus now, because I think we are more understanding that we need to support people, and being a leader, it's not about your ego, it's not about you, it's about your team, it's about how you're developing this team and how you're helping to support their career journeys.
Yeah, and I think as you think about, you were talking about the team and how the team is greater than the I think sometimes people forget that as a leader, your team's accomplishments are also a reflection of you as a leader. So advocating for them and sharing their achievements with more senior leadership and out into the world and pulling people up and making them successful. Yes, you shouldn't operate like an egotistical leader, but at the same time, like, doing those things for your team is what makes you seen as a stronger leader as well.
And you can't accomplish anything without your team, right?
Yes,
So
exactly.
you should operate as a dream team, as a family. I'm giving these examples because I'm trying always to support my people and support them. And there are different leadership styles when you're staying in front and on the back, and depends on how do you feel it's right for the team and for yourself, and what stage of development the team has right now. But in the end, you always need to have this support and provide this support and help to build the team and grow it. And then on the different stages, you also need to act differently, because the team that is only forming and a very well-developed team will require different energy, different dynamic, and different communication with the leader.
You touched on something really interesting, and that is the point that different people also need a different leadership style. I think that was certainly a mistake that I made when I was earlier in my career as a leader. Is I made the mistake of thinking, well, everyone wants what I want, and I would love this leadership style, so everyone else should love this leadership style as well. And then I found that I was really failing in some ways, that there were certain people who needed a much different approach. And so again, it's not about you. It's not about me. It's not about what I want. It's really about figuring out and sitting down with every individual on your team and trying to understand what's motivating to them, what gets them excited in the morning when they wake up, what brings them energy when they enter the room and gets them just so excited to start the next project. And so I think that was a really big turning point for me personally, when I just realized, oh, you really do need to adjust things for the person. And then sometimes it's daily with COVID, with all of the things that are happening in the world. They really have to be conscious to create a space where you can kind of adjust and have some flux to be there for your people in the moment that you're in.
And the challenge of managing diverse teams is that there's a huge hurdle in the early stages of like figuring out all the various styles and how to make it work for everybody, and then the environment changes and whatever. But once you can accommodate that and make space for that diversity, that's when you get to that amazing like next level of flywheel momentum.
Yes.
And unlock all that difference of thought into great work. And it takes that effort in the beginning, because if you just like go to the lowest common denominator or the most dominant style, like you'll get there faster, but the work won't be as good.
Yeah, and I've made that mistake that you were saying, where I thought, I don't like to be micromanaged, so everyone on my team, I can just give them the high level of what I need to get done and go do it, and aren't I empowering them, and not realizing that, especially as people are coming up, a lot of them need a lot more guidance, and that is how you make them successful. So just being conscious of that, I think, is so critical.
I also think that right now with COVID, the big word is empathy, right? And with more remote work, you have to make an effort. When you're back to back on Zooms and you jump right in it from a meeting standpoint, you don't really know what's going on in people's life. So you have to make a conscious effort to really understand what's going on, what's making them tick, what is the challenges, on top of just getting the job done. And that takes an effort. And if you don't do that, you're not going to build the trust. But once you do that trust, you have a whole different momentum. So how are you? Taking that 1 second to find out what's going on goes a really long way.
Yeah. I agree. Asking questions is the key of all empathy and building the right dynamic in the team. Because without asking questions, people they won't tell you. And like if you just use this practice of asking questions and making sure that you understand and you are proactively listening your people, you will manage to get a lot of information that will help you to drive your success and success of the team.
Yeah, that's such a great leadership lesson. The 2 ears, one mouth, twice as much listening.
Just listen.
Absolutely. Well, and when you're really listening and taking time to ask, even if it is about personal things, how are things going at home? There's so many things. People are taking care of kids, parents, dogs, children. There's so many different things. And I also find that when you have those conversations, they may start really at that personal level, but then the person also feels relaxed and disarmed. And so if they are struggling with something, or there's something that they've been meaning to broach with you, but weren't really sure how to do it, then it really creates that space where they can really feel like, okay, this is a safe space. I can really share what we're doing and we can problem solve, versus kind of going away and toiling over, how do I bring this to Tennille?
It's so amazing how different it feels when you feel safe at work. Safe to admit, how you're feeling or what you're dealing with, or to try things that are, risky, or, that just makes such a difference.
Yeah, a space to fail. I know no one likes that word. I don't like it either. It makes my it makes my shoulders go to my ears, but space to fail or to try things and maybe it doesn't turn out as great as you had hoped are still amazing learning experiences. So as long as it's in a controlled way and it's not going to have huge implications on the business, it's really so important, because if you do fail and then that person feels confident to tell you that and to say, I tried this, it didn't work out so well, can we talk about different approaches? I have some ideas, let's talk through it. I think that can just be so impactful and give the individual just a moment to really almost empower themselves. And
I think you learn more from failing sometimes than success, but you have to take the time to say, okay, well, what didn't work? And how are we going to change it? And typically, you got to fail a few times to have that great success as the jump off. And typically, when you fail together, you also create a team. So it's okay to recognize and say, okay, this didn't work, but here's what we would have done different, and how are we going to make it much better?
The debrief is so important.
That's the part of the process. To
you
fail.
have to make the time
that's okay.
to do
And
that.
I think people fear the debrief, because most people that I know, they call it a post-mortem or something that's so ominous. And you think, well, who wants to show up? It sounds like everyone should make notes about all the other people and the things that they did wrong, so that you can deflect attention from yourself, instead of sometimes, yes, things went wrong, but creating a space that's really comfortable to talk about what really happened outside of what anyone's individual role was. And the other thing is, I think that people should also have debriefs when things go really well.
Yes.
And no one does that. I mean, if something goes well, we all say like, okay, great, that was great. That product launch went amazingly well. On to the next. And when things go really well, I mean, yes, there's the celebrate the wins, do the dinners, do the high fives, but also let's sit down and talk about what did each individual contribute to that, and how did they really just make that success that much greater. And that for me is something that I think I still forget, but I try to remember and bring back.
Yeah, and you just gave me a great lesson that I'm going to stop calling them postmortems. I think though, as a leader too, it's important that to create that safe space that we're also sharing when we are failing or when things aren't going well, because then if you're sharing that out and showing what's behind the scenes in your world that they might not see every day, then your team will feel more comfortable bringing those things to you and not hiding them, or they're dreading for 2 days. I have to tell my leader something that didn't go wrong. It's okay. We all make these mistakes, even if it was a personal mistake or a mistake of a team. It doesn't matter. We move on and we find a way forward.
But for me, sometimes as the leader, you just have to take the blame.
Yes.
Just so you can move forward.
Yes.
It wasn't you, who cares? Take the
Yes.
blame, let's realize it so that we can move on as a team. And what you do in the process is you create a high level of trust with your team. But sometimes you just can't move if you're stuck in this blame game.
Absolutely. I think trust is just so important, and those are the ways to create it, is to just sometimes, yes, you have to say, okay, well, my fault, and we'll all we'll all move on, and everyone like come fresh tomorrow and we'll start the day again. And I think that's so true.
It's also a big challenge for the leader to get this feedback from your team.
Yes.
Because to build this trust, you need to be like in a safe space, both the leader and your team as well. And sometimes it's really hard to get this information from people, because historically they are afraid to come to you and just share feedback about their mood, about what is happening, about the project, and maybe someone from another team who is not really good partner for your team member. So all these things, it's really important for you as a leader to know, and to build this trust and partnership with your team. Like one practice that I'm doing, I'm asking them to provide me feedback. We all have these feedback loops, but usually they expect that their manager will provide this feedback. But instead of that, I'm asking, you tell me how I should manage you, or how this organization should change to make you feel better. And these are a lot of interesting insights that we can get from people, because they're open to share. They have a lot of brilliant ideas. And this way it builds trust, it builds safe space for everyone to share, and it also helps business to move forward.
I've heard the word trust like a dozen times already. And I saw an article recently that was trust is the new brand equity. It's really interesting how that's like parallel to like what's happening in the world of brand, that how important trust is. I mean, I guess it's the environment we're living in, that there's such a heightened desire for trust. And it shows up in all the leadership lessons that we're feeling.
Trust and empathy, I think, are
Yes.
two
Buzzwords.
really key points. And yes, I think it becomes buzzwords, but it's also just so critical to the day-to-day. What are some initiatives that you have led that are sort of breaking down barriers and helping to carve stairs into stone for those who are coming up after us? Chantelle?
So I'm highly involved with the FIT programs, both the undergrad and graduate programs at FIT. And it's really taking the next generation and making them feel empowered. So whether it's the mentor program, speaking on panels with them, getting really involved with the students of the next generation. I'm a girl from Buffalo. Somebody gave me a shot one day. And so for me, it's all about giving the next generation a shot.
Yeah, totally
I love
agree.
that.
Yeah, same. I think about that all the time. Somebody, not one time, multiple times, gave me a shot and took a chance on me. And that's what I try to do with my team every single day. So when we have roles open, if we can possibly fill it internally, I try to fill it internally and then support those people with the right support that they need. Because just putting them in the position, kind of setting them free, is not setting them up for success. And then, as I was sharing earlier, every 6 months with all of my managers, we do calibrations to look at people's level and compensation, just so that we're constantly thinking about our people on par in terms of, compensation equity and title equity, just so that we don't inadvertently make those mistakes that have been made in the past.
Yeah, because it's just so demotivating. If you find out that you're one of those people who your equivalent has gotten the promotion, has gotten that raise, and then they didn't, it's just heartbreaking.
I'm always trying to understand what people actually want, so that I could help and support this career roadmap. And that's all about personalization. You can't build this list of suggestions that will fit to anyone. So I'm always trying to work with my team, understanding what is happening in their world, where they want to go, and also unlock their potential, because sometimes they're just afraid to admit that they wanted to achieve these heights, or maybe to move somewhere else. Maybe they just want to be an artist or want somewhere outside of brand marketing and marketing in general. So I'm always trying to understand what is in there and then help to unlock this potential. And I'm always trying to say that everything is possible, because I became a leader when I was 27. I moved to another country. I'm a woman immigrant. It's really hard and challenging for me, but still I made it. And I think just by leading by this example helps just to inspire people and live their dreams and achieve these things that they want. And always ask 2 questions: how and what? Because again, question is the key, because people, they know all these answers. They're inside of them. You just need to facilitate this process, unlock their thoughts, unlock their potential. So usually it's just a mentoring, coaching, when I'm asking, what do you want, how you want to get there? And it just helps a lot to reflect, and then they usually have these answers inside them. So
I love that.
Amazing. 2 quick stories. The first one is anchored in a mantra that I heard once, be the leader you wish you had. And it can start at any level of leadership. Do the little things. And I picked up a tip when I was doing some advisory work at a startup, and I found that the environment was really trust building. And I was like, what is it that makes this environment so great? And one of the little things that was true in that environment was they had open calendars, everybody's calendar is visible up to the founder. And so you could use that information to be like, oh, I see they're talking to the founder, in a week about that, so I need to, and I was like, I'm going to take that with me. And so at my next job, I was like, I'm going to make my calendar transparent. And there was no setting to do that. You couldn't actually, but I was like, all right, I'll share my calendar with my team. My team loved it. And so, it was a little thing, but it was a little thing that I brought with me. And I was like, okay, this is what I wish I had. So I'm going to do what I can with it. The other story I'd love to share is the biggest initiative that I've done on the topic of carving stairs into stone, which is the book that I've written with my fellow women. We all worked at Pepsi for a long time. And we've written this book, You Should Smile More, which is about the little things that add up to culture. And I'm really excited about it because it's trying to make really practical, like what you can do. What you can do if it's you as the woman experiencing it, but also like inviting men into the conversation, like as leaders, both men and women, like what you should be looking out for. And I'm just really excited that it might actually add to the conversation and hopefully, put another little chink in the stone.
I love that. It's like you have those two critical pieces. What can women do and how can they navigate? But then also, how can you educate and inform male leaders and bosses to be a little bit more conscious about those small things? Because like you said, they add up and they can make a big difference.
To lean into that, there's a quote that says, culture eats strategy for breakfast.
Yes, I love that.
You can have the best strategy, you can communicate it, it can be crystal clear, but if you have a crappy culture where people don't want to be there, you can never be successful. So the culture is super important, and what you also have to make sure is that culture needs to be driven from every seat. It can't just be one person at the top. Everyone has to believe in it and make sure that they work at it every day. And so I think as a leader, it's everyone's job to drive what is the culture? How can I create a place that is a place where everyone wants to be?
What are your biggest tips for creating a positive culture?
It's tough, right? I think everyone thinks it's the big things. It's not. It's the little things that really matter. So anything you could do with those little things. So my team, we go once a quarter. We do something called the Trend Tour. It sounds really simple. We live in an amazing city. Just getting out there, seeing what's out there. There's no PowerPoint. There's no presentation. Just go have fun. And I take the team and I mix them up cross-functionally. So while they know each other, they actually don't work together in a different way. And they can do anything they want. And usually the most junior or new people, I make them lead the team. And at the end, we just regroup. And it's amazing the bonds they build, the relationships they build, the team that comes out of it and fosters. Does it cost a lot of money? No. Those are the things that really matter.
Well, and FaceTime also probably with you and the other leaders, and just having that time that has nothing to do with work and and really just getting to know each other better.
Now that we're in I don't know if we're COVID or post-COVID or what terminology we use now, but
Limbo.
We used to have most of my team was Boston based, and now they're spread globally. So just bringing them together is so huge. Just getting them to meet everybody, to meet the people in the office, to do fun things together. I agree. It doesn't have to be big. It doesn't have to be costly. We use Slack at our organization. Like when something great happens, I make sure I reach out to people. I make sure that the managers are making it visible so that people can constantly share in the wins and the successes together.
Yeah, these connections outside of work are also important because you need to understand the other side of life and also being able to support your working environment based on people. And I think this culture is tough. I agree. It takes a lot of time, a lot of thinking, and it's just some additional workload that you have apart from delivering the business results. So it's important, and it's just important also to allocate your time to build this culture and align with everyone who could support this process, because it's not about one person who can drive the culture. It's about everyone, and everyone should accept it and decide where this culture is going.
And I think in the past it was thought of that being nice, you can't necessarily be effective. And I think that is changing. Ultimately, when people respect you, it's not being friends with you. You have a respect that's mutual. It's amazing what can foster. So I think in the past it was, this is the leadership style, and you have to be this horrible, horrific person to get anything done. And that's not the case anymore. And so I think that you have to really adapt your style with what is you, and how are you going to make your people most effective.
I think in this whole COVID, post-COVID, wherever we are, moment is an opportunity for a culture reset, because everyone is thinking actively about, how do I create the environment at work? Like, what's the office and how many days? There's a lot of focus on like how many days are people in the office and which days and stuff like that. I'd love to hear more conversation about like how are we going to measure success of whatever the days or expectations are, and that might allow more conversation around what you use the in-person for. Like you use the in-person person for those trust building opportunities and, get to know yous and like let your guard down and creative sessions and whatever. And then the at home can be more for the productive work. I think we're going to see a lot of new models come out, and this is like a moment to reset and think about that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to that transparency too. Like for me as a leader, I believe it's probably powerful when I'm telling my team, hey, it's noon on a Friday. It's really nice out. I'm going to get my daughter early and I'm going to take her to the park. Like people don't have to feel like, oh my God, everyone's coming in 2 days or 3 days to the office. Do I have to do that? Or do I have to work these certain hours? As long as the things are getting accomplished and we can measure success, that should be the most important thing.
Right. It's not about babysitting. It's about getting the most out of your team, making them feel like, treating them like adults, treating them with respect. I think that's something, Tennille, that you said that I loved, is if you are coming to the table with mutual respect, then you can really figure those things out, because there is a lot of unknown in terms of returning to the office. What is the right blend? And so I think that is probably a good place to start, is with respect, understanding what everyone needs. Maria, to your point, what you were talking about a little bit earlier. So my last question is, you all have incredibly busy work lives as well as home lives. And I'd love to know one thing that each of you do to kind of keep the sanity and center yourselves each week or as you're heading into a new week.
I always laugh because, especially with women, everyone talks about balance. And I think there's no such thing as balance. For me, it's keeping things in balance. So if your career is going well, typically your life's falling apart. If your life's going well, usually your career is falling apart. You're not eating well, you're not taking care of yourself. So I think for the future, we all have to figure out how do we keep things in balance, which is probably the hardest thing for everyone, women and men, but women especially. I know it sounds really simple, but my husband and I, since COVID, we try once a week to go for a walk in the morning. And it sounds so simple to go for a walk, but it's sometimes the only time we talk. And not talk about, the kid and this and that, just talk. And it's really basic, just going for a walk, being one with nature. And it's amazing how your relationship connects. So we try to do a gym class or walk at least once a week. It's basic, but for me, exercise is my thing. It really, no matter what, in the morning, I wake up super early. I take a class, a Peloton, whatever it may be, exercise in the morning. And even when I'm exhausted, it's quiet. I hear the birds chirping, I clear my day. And even when I hate it, it's become something you love.
I love that.
Mine's very similar. For me, physical activity and fitness and getting outdoors is very connected to my own mental health. And I carve out time to do that. Yes, you could spend that extra hour and a half doing more work, but making sure that for me, that's my dedicated time, whether it be, I've been doing CrossFit for quite a while. I might go to a class. I might put on like a true crime podcast and go for a run or go for a walk, just making sure I have that space for that physical activity. And it doesn't matter the deadlines, the other things I have to get done, because at the end of the day, I'll be worse off if I'm not doing those activities.
You asked a really good question. It's so hard to answer. Because it's usually about the small things in your routine, and you should do them every day, because when you start to break your routine, like everything is falling apart. So my two small things that I'm trying to do, it's not working on Saturday, Sunday. That's important. That's my time. I can do everything that I want, but just not do not open the laptop. I had the sticker on the laptop that I put actually just to make sure that I won't do that. And it was hard for me, because as a hard worker, I used to do that. And then when I became a manager, actually, I tried to change this routine and habit, because when I started to text during the weekend to my team members, I realized that maybe I'm doing something wrong and maybe I should have a life apart from work. So that's the tip number one. And the tip number 2, I try also to go outside of the city once per 3 months, just to travel abroad in the US. But for me, it's just an opportunity to learn something new and to get inspiration, because without inspiration, staying in this routine for so long, it's also could be exhausting. So just don't work during the weekend and try to get some fresh air.
The one tip that's worked for me is not to think about balance in any one day, but maybe in a week, because I can pretty much get everything I want to happen within a week time frame, and it puts a little less pressure on any individual day. But I'll offer one other fun thing that has worked for me with my family. So my kids are a little older than your guys' kids, but to get people off screens and engaging with each other, we play board games. And board games have come a long way since when we were kids. And now there's some really fantastic collaborative board games, and it's really fun. We spend a couple hours, and the dining room table has not had dinner on it in a really long time. It's board games.
I love that.
Oh, that's great.
It's great.
Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining us. This has been a wonderful conversation. I've really enjoyed it and enjoyed getting to know each of you. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Chantelle.
you.